everybody out there. Mike McDonald and Chris Stiles with you again for yet another episode of Forbidden Science UFO, aka FSUFO, or you could call it Foxtrot Sierra Uniform Foxtrot Oscar. And we've got a really great show lined up for you today. I'm really excited about this one. We have Craig Campobasso all the way from Hollywood, California. Craig is a casting director in Hollywood. He's worked on such films as Dune and Total Recall and many others. And what's even better is he's a UFO and alien enthusiast and an author, and a prolific author at that. One of the books that we're going to concentrate on today, I'm very excited about, and I'll get to that in a second, but just a little bit about Craig. So Craig, he's a multiple award-winning filmmaker and Emmy-nominated casting director. He was 15 when he started in the entertainment business, and he was even acting, and he was off to a great start. He landed his first national commercial for McDonald's chicken sandwich and spoke in his first line of dialogue to Tuesday Weld, Chris, of all people, in a movie of the week. Yeah. After graduating high school at 17, he went to work behind the scenes for films such as Herbert's Dune, directed by Dave Lynch, of course, and two Schwarzenegger movies, Conan the Destroyer. Do you remember that one? And Total Recall, I definitely remember that one. Yeah. He began his casting career on Spielberg's Amazing Stories, which is pretty cool, and even got an Emmy nomination for outstanding casting for a series on David E. Kelly's Picket Fences. Chris, I know that's near and dear to your heart.
My favorite show of all time.
Yeah.
Slightly beat out the original Outer Limits in black and white to do that, but I just love that show. You know, I have all the files. I watch it once a year, particularly at the holidays. Yeah. Absolute favorite.
And then
go ahead.
Yeah, hold on a second. I'm just not finished with Craig. With Craig yet. Craig's mother, Marie Donna King Campobasso, told him from the time that she was pregnant, I love this, that she knew he would become a writer. And he fulfilled that prophecy when he was 26, after he experienced a life-changing spiritual awakening. Chris, you can follow up on that. That's when the autobiography of an extraterrestrial saga book series was born. His passion to write stories that provoke the reader to think, to raise their consciousness, to expand their mind about creation while still entertaining the Hollywood tradition. And the book that we're going to concentrate on today is called The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, the ultimate guide to greys, reptilians, hybrids, and Nordics. Aliens, Chris. We're talking aliens today.
Yes, and now that I know there's 82 species, I will need an almanac.
Well, my head's on a swivel. With 82, you just don't know.
Well, no, and let me tell you something. In one sense, I'm probably the last person that should have invited Craig here to quiz him about this book, but I know you got a bunch up your sleeve ready, you know, because I seen how excited you got.
Aliens. I love the aliens. I'm pretty sure I know some aliens.
Well, let me just put the light on myself for just a second to tell you that when I first got in this business, which, as you know, was 92, 93 here in Canada, right? And my role and my background and what I've been doing in the UFO field was so different than Craig's. And I jumped in and I was green as grass, and all the stuff I'd followed was from decades earlier. And I can remember when people would call and try and help me, and MUFON members were one of them that did. I can remember when Canada's director at the time there, called me up, and he'd be telling me things to give me advice. And he says, well, you know, that case, they know it was the Greys, you know about the Greys, right? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he didn't know what to make of me or whatever. So now that I know about the Greys and the reptilians and a few others, I find out after having, worked a little with something on Craig here that there's 82 species. So I will need the almanac and some catching up to do.
Yeah, me too. Listen, we have a trailer for the book that Sean's going to roll, and then we're going to bring Craig on. Enough of us. Let's look at the trailer, which is really fabulously produced, and then let's talk to Craig. Well, I
Wow.
don't know what to say. I'm gobsmacked. Craig, super trailer. Super trailer.
Yeah.
You
I
Hollywood
know.
guys, you surprised us.
I still get the chills. You know, that music just goes right through you. The way Chris, our incredible editor, who has worked on something like 60 um, uh, giant studio movies as a post production supervisor, he put that together for me, and
Super.
I see. I haven't seen it in a while, and it always gets me every time I see it because you know the music and everything put together with it is like
Yes.
amazing. But before we start, there's way more than 82 races. That's all I could fit into the book of 300
Great.
of
I
300 pages that the publisher won. I had to stay within a certain limit, so I picked 82 in honor of Paul Hellyer because
Ah,
his one of his
oh
last interviews he said he knew of 82 races visiting Earth, and I had to pick a number. So I said, I'm going to honor Paul Hellyer because he is so beloved by everyone in the UFO community, including myself.
yeah.
So I decided to honor him and use the number 82. So,
Well, that's super, Craig. That's super. And of course, for those of you who may know,
yeah.
Paul Hellyer is a Canadian and was a
Yes.
prominent
former
Canadian. Yeah.
defense minister. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was
Former
a
defense.
former defense minister. Yeah, and
Yeah.
what a change! You know, he made such an impact in in the field of UFOs. But as a politician, he had a pretty rough ride. I don't know how much you know about that. I actually remember those years. I was a young fella, and at one point, he was called the most hated man in Canada, and that was simply because of his effort in the government of the day to combine the armed forces into a single unified force. Folk songs were written about it. Michael, I don't know if you remember Oscar Brand. I know Craig would. Kind of, he slipped into the dustbin of history, but I can remember the song on the radio said, how did it go? The the Navy says, let's turn to orange because no one likes green uniforms, especially the Army and the Navy and Admiral Andy Moore. And you know what that's about. But we'll stop picking on him. But
Yeah, let's
um,
get to the
I,
aliens. Let's get to the aliens.
yeah, let's get
So,
to the
Chris,
aliens.
Craig, I got a question for you. So, what possessed you to write these series of books, and in particular this book? What possessed you to write this, and where? How did you do your
well,
research?
Well, I when I was 26 years old, I had a major spiritual awakening, and in that awakening, I all of a sudden became fully interested in everything otherworldly, what was out there in the universe. Prior to that, I had no clue, didn't never thought of it, just lived my life. And so I began investigating and reading up on all of the various cases. And the ones that really intrigued me the most were the ones that happened primarily during the 50s. So it was as they called them back then, it was during the Space Brother era. You know,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah.
studied all of those cases. I don't know if anybody realizes this, but Colonel Wendell Stevens published 65 books on extraterrestrial contactee cases.
Did you know that, Chris?
I didn't know how many. I knew he did a
Yeah.
lot. I first became aware of him in '93. I remember there was a lecture Stanton Friedman was doing at the
Yes.
Agricultural College in Truro, and he was showing and referring to a lot of Wendell's work, at that
Yes.
time. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So a lot of the races are human. Some are not human, like the Garthans and other things like that. So a lot of this research that I did is I either called for the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, is I either called the publishers, obtained permission, and then or contacted the actual contactees and obtained permission. And then what I did is then did up a write up, which the publisher only wanted sort of like a thumbnail review, maybe 1 or 2 pages. right? And so then in the end of the book, under further reading, if somebody looked up Clermers, they would know that that was from a Wendell Stevens book, and it would tell you right where to go to get it, because all these books are out of print.
Right. Then that's a
So
challenge.
it's a big challenge, but the good news about Wendell's books is they are all on PDF on UFOphotoarchives.org. His daughter, Cece Stevens, she runs it, and you can even purchase all of the books in PDF for something like $100 and something. Right.
Well, that's great. Listen,
So
we'll add that link to the description of this video, as well as links to you.
yes,
But that's good for people to get
yes,
to that. Yeah,
it
absolutely.
is.
So
And then
I got a question for you, Craig. So
yeah.
if there's at least 83 species of aliens, what are the basic categories, like the phylum, you know what I mean? Like, out of 82, how many categories are there?
Well, the
Or
categories
can you even do that?
Well, the interesting thing is the ones that have been seen on Earth are primarily human, reptilian, um, hybrids, and what's the other one?
The
Grays.
Greys, I guess, huh?
Grays.
Right.
And so, but there are other ones like the Allagash abductions were ant people, right? So,
The insectoids.
so that the insectoids, and then so in the almanac we also get into like the mantises, which are sort of like insectoids, and things of that nature from people who had experiences with them. I actually interviewed a woman who claims to be a mantis hybrid. So it's really interesting studying all of the. I interviewed lots of hybrids. Some had several different kinds of DNA. One specific hybrid, for instance, her father was in the military, and what happened was they were in contact with different races, and they were given different DNA from different species, reptilian, different kinds of humans, etc. And what they did is when his wife became pregnant, they, through some course, don't know if it was done through abduction or whatever, as they injected that DNA into the embryo. And so she grew up her entire life. She's passed on now, but she had the most amazing aqua eyes. Her skin was a little different, and her fingers were different, but she had the most kind benevolence that you could ever know. And she was totally into extraterrestrials and sharing information with people, because she was so connected to it because of this DNA. Other hybrids have said that it was placed in them later in life, into their DNA system. Sometimes, so one woman said at age 5, other things like that. So it's very interesting, and there are more and more of these kind of people who are hybrids that come out. Now, I once spoke to a man who claims to have worked at the CIA, right? I can't confirm it because I don't know who works at the CIA, but he told me that the CIA primarily only hires hybrids because of their super intelligence.
Interesting.
So there is a way, I guess, that they can tell, but I really don't know what that is. So I know that there's been some documentaries on hybrids, and I'm not sure how far down the rabbit hole they went.
You hear about these indigo children. I wonder if there's some sort of correlation between that.
Well, those are the indigo children, the starseed children. I've met many of indigo, crystal, and starseed children. And one boy at age 15 was when I first met him. He spoke 5-star languages. He spoke them for me. And he would tell me what he was saying and what it meant. He could draw star maps. He could do other things. There was another kid who's now, I think he's 18. I'm still friends with his mom. He did crystal grids. He was doing crystal grids when he was a little kid.
What's a crystal grid?
In other words, people, because he was into crystals, he would create these grids that he would explain what these grids were doing for the planet, right? So people from all over the world started sending him crystals, and he would build these grids, and his mom would film it, and they would upload it onto the internet. So, so there's these really, really, really advanced kids coming in now that are like super smart.
Right.
You know, I met some indigos in Ventura, California.
Yeah.
And one of the strangest things they told me I met, and we were introduced, and I had a few minor questions for them. And one of them, it was a pair of girls, and they were like 11, 12 with their mother. And one of them looked at me and says, "Mom, he can blow air out his ears without breathing or forcing it." And I thought, what does that mean? And she said, "You can, can't you?" And when I thought about it, I thought, well, that's something I've been doing. I didn't even know what it was or how to describe it. And I said, I don't know. I just clear my ears that way. And she says, and when you do it, it actually makes a noise. And I hadn't done it there, and I wouldn't have known what she was talking about. It was the strangest thing. And they, I can remember we laughed so long, like it took them some time to encourage me to try to do it. And the mother had to leave the room, because momentarily I couldn't stop laughing. And she said, I'll just step outside, do it for them like this. I don't know what that means, but quite an observation, right?
Yes.
The Alligator sightings that you mentioned, Craig, I once presented with the Wiener brothers back in the 90s there.
Nice.
Yes, I did. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I was with them. And, that was a great conference I was at. I was with them and Colonel Cooper, when he was still alive there. But you know what? I've never forgot about them. If anybody ever suffered from those experiences, it was those brothers. I'll never forget the X-ray. Have you seen where the skull is split right in two inside his head from his fall and that being, chucked around? It was just, when they showed that X-ray, it looked like it had been surgically cut. His skull was actually in two pieces, and it had to be all pinned and all kinds of things. It was just incredible when they showed the medical data. Yeah. I always remember that.
And which one was that? Which one of the guys? Because there was 4 of them, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was the guy who was least talkative. I can't remember his name right now. They were a last-minute replacement for Travis Walton at this conference. He had to drop out for some reason, and they come in. But I knew just the background of it, but I can always remember having met them, and when they showed the things they endured, it would shock anybody. It was just beyond what would happen if you fell down or was in a car crash. Like the injuries and the things they showed and demonstrated. Incredible.
Wow, that was a great book. I love Raymond Fowler's stuff. I mean, is it, how do you say it? Andreessen? Is it Andreessen affair? Remember that one? Andreessen. Yeah. I love those books way back when. You know, I've had them all. I recently was I got to speak to Betty and Bob, and that was a thrill for me. So, because I was a fan of those books.
Mm-hmm. I think it's behind on the shelf here. That was gifted to me by Dr. Bob Hieronymus, I think years ago when I was in Baltimore there. So cool.
Cool stuff. So I got a question. A couple of questions for you, Craig. is good getting
Sure.
back to these extraterrestrials. Do you have an opinion upon as to the origin? I know if there's 83, there's probably potentially 83 different answers to this, or as you say, hundreds. But what is your feeling about the origins of these creatures, or even or struggling to find the word, but one of the words I can throw, are they actually real live flesh and blood creatures? Are they traveling in actual mechanical or some sort of spacecraft, or are they
Mm-hmm.
interdimensional, or are we looking at some sort of a combination of all of these things? What's your feelings about that?
Well, it's a wide answer, so I'll give you the sort of broad spectrum. In the
Sure.
back of the ET Almanac book, I did a whole section on the technology of the extraterrestrial craft that are enlightened beings because they share their technology. So I just didn't want to be repetitive in every single enlightened races section. So it's all in the back of the book, and there you can read about their motherships, starships, saucer craft, other shaped craft, different things like that. So they share their technology with everyone. Um,
Right.
and then there is also the technology of the darker beings. So that is also in there as well. There is also sort of like the cosmic laws for enlightened beings, which is a whole different set from unenlightened beings, and those are more universal laws than like our laws that we have here that Moses gave the world. So
Right. Written laws. Yeah.
written laws, yeah. So
Hmm.
um, so uh, out of all of the races, the main thing that we all have to remember is you have to judge the individual and not the race, because within every race there's always going to be fractions of shoot off bad parts of even an enlightened fully conscious race. There's going to
Hmm.
be those fractions that fall, and we know that because we know that angels can fall, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we know that that this can, and then those go and they create offshoots.
Hmm.
Now, out of all of the contactees and people that I have researched and interviewed, is they're having face to face contact with these extraterrestrial beings. So they are flesh and blood. And if you go back and you look at the Hopi and some of the other Native American tribes, um, they they were friends with what did they call them? The Naga, which were the snake people, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Snake people, right there.
Right. Right.
So, and they were enlightened, and they supposedly lived below the earth, as well as some reptilians. If you go back into ancient Egypt hieroglyphics, you will find flying saucers cut into the rocks. You will find other different kind of flying machines, especially in Mexico. In Aztec stuff, there are so many different carvings into all of the rocks and things like that of gray looking type beings and their
Hmm.
crafts. Some of them within the craft, these rocks have been carbon dated way back in time. So they're not something that somebody was creating to make money off of now. I have
Right.
actually seen a friend of mine has a couple hundred of these rocks in their collection, and I was able to examine and look at a bunch of them, and then a few other private pieces that they keep close to home because they're like, one was like a spaceship, and it had all these moving parts that you can pull apart that dated way back. Into those eras back then. I'm not sure what the date was, but
Hmm. Hmm.
so Now we do know that a lot of people have met humans. Some of the races are living here. Maurizio Cavallo is a contactee in Italy, and he has been in contact with the Clarion race, which is a human race. And this is one of the females. Here's a color picture of her. Let me see if I can get
A
it.
little bit to the left there. You're the
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm
there we go. There we go.
Oh, there we go. So
Yeah.
her name is
very human looking, huh?
Why can't I get it there? There we go.
Sorry, you go to your left or whatever it is.
There
it's
we
hard
go.
to say if you're
there we go.
I see her. Put it right in front of your face.
Oh, there we go. I'll do it in front of my
there
face.
She is.
Her name's there we go. Her name's Nelfa, and she deals with astrobiology and chronoastronomy, dimensional. So she works between the dimensions, but all of the beings that are up there that are enlightened and fully conscious, they do all different kinds of jobs. You know, they drive the ships, they can do all this stuff because they mentally connect to the ship.
Well, what would be an unenlightened being, Craig?
Well, an unenlightened being. Well, I think in the beginning here, when they started capturing ships back in Roswell and before Roswell, is those were not fully conscious beings, because their technology was not organic. They didn't have organic technology then. So organic technology is where they actually, some ships will just have an organic brain, or some ships even go as far as having internal organs and things like that. And also the skin of the ship is also a part of the organics. And sometimes if it's a commander or which usually a lot of times are from the angelic class, is that their DNA will be within that craft, in the skin and in the organs. So they're the only ones that can actually fly the ship, because they connect, when they connect to the ship, it recognizes their DNA, and then they can jump it across the universe or jump it into another universe or what have you. So
the ship basically becomes an extension of them, or becomes a living being, which
right.
kind of makes me think, Chris, about the concept of whether, some UFOs are in fact, I can't remember the word you use, Chris, but a living creature of some sort.
A living entity that are themselves.
They are.
And I believe I have witnessed such a thing as recently as 2018. We had a sighting with video here, in September 2018. And I think that's one of the more likely possibilities of what it was. Something else, Craig, I'd like to bring up right now, because I'm sure there's a lot in our audience. We have a kind of audience here that we've kind of targeted and we attract, and hopefully will grow. But one of the things is, it's a full range of people that see this phenomena. From some people will hopefully be pre-ordering your book right now or going for that signed copy there. And there are others that are going to be out there saying, what is this man talking about? And one of the things I always like to remind the skeptical amongst us, and there's such a thing as skeptical believers, right? Is this, that somebody that you would, we all know, or knew, I should say, in the past tense, who most people would see as a skeptic, but that wasn't quite fair. The late celebrity astronomer Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan thought that we're visited by aliens, but not near as often as, say, you might or I might think, or somebody else in the audience that has a different take on it. But even somebody Sagan like that, who, was very skeptical of most of the UFO data, argued that, in fact, he believed that the Dogon tribe in Africa had contact with extraterrestrials, and he thought their knowledge of what stars in the sky without optical instruments were double stars, and it was dead on in the cases where they did that. He could find no other explanation for it. And so he said, well, it's not every other weekend. Maybe it's 1 in 10,000 years. The point is, his mind, even somebody who most people would brand a skeptic, was open enough that he was open to the ETH. He would have probably just thought, oh my God, 82, I can't deal with 82. I'm sitting here, and here's Michael saying, well, there's more, and I'm smelling, volume 2 coming out down the road, right? But the point
Right.
is, like a lot of people, their acceptance, their threshold, I'd call it, of acceptance for evidence, varies widely. But even many of the harshest skeptics, there's some that would have been beyond the pale here. But even Sagan, actually did believe in the ETH and believed that, some of the things from ancient times and tribes like that were indicative of contact, old contact from long ago. So I'm just putting this out here to address the people that are saying, don't skip ahead to the next episode. Don't whatever here,
Right.
because you got to have an open mind. And how far you open it, what you let in is up to you. But we're going to present it all here. I'm just addressing those curmudgeons. Now I'm going to let Michael here just go in and get the juice out of you here, Craig, because
Well,
I know. Actually, I got one. You know what? Is there any
what?
aliens here that aren't humanoid in the almanac? I've always had this thing. I've always been attracted to saying, where did they get this, and what sighting was that? When I love these ones where you get these exotic aliens that are like non-humanoid, where it's shaped like a tombstone but has one arm without a hand or something. This kind of thing. Is there any there that are non-humanoid in the almanac?
I no, but
No. Okay.
I have seen some that look that other people claim that they have had
Mm-hmm.
contact with in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in dream state, astral state, or whatever, and that they look completely different from anything that we would even have a concept of seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, and just to address what you just said before, that's absolutely right. I mean, I always quote Albert Einstein, where he said, the mind is like a parachute, it only works when it's open.
Yes, yeah,
But
and I
Craig,
love his.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love his other one that's attributed, and then I'll just let Michael get to some of those hot questions. I love how when he was first asked about unidentified flying objects back in the day, it would have been in his twilight years, but he was still alive. And when they asked him what did he think they saw, and he says, "I'm not sure what they saw, but I'm sure they saw something."
Yes.
hmm.
Right.
Just
Right.
going back to that, question of humanoid, humanoid, non-humanoid. I can't remember the source that inspired me with this thought. Was that basically the thought was is that the universe is engineered for humanoid creatures. That in actual
Yes.
fact, it is a natural progression of life, and that you know in the 1940s and 50s sci-fi movies, the art directors went through great pains to create like for example, It Conquered the World, the inverted ice cream cone with the little flippers at the bottom of it, like anything that didn't look
Right.
human.
Right.
And of course,
Right.
all of the contactees and the abductees are reporting, oh, I mean, he was tall, he was blonde, he had nice eyes, or it was a little creature 4 feet tall, 4 fingers, whatever, but they were all humanoid. And in my opinion, I think that, and it's obviously an unexpert opinion, but hey, it's an unexpert show, is that the humanoid form it works in the universe.
It
Now,
does.
that's not to
Yeah,
say that there wouldn't be some sort of balloon-shaped creature floating around in the
yeah,
atmosphere of Jupiter. Just like, for example, how do you explain a platypus? But
yeah,
when you talk about
Right.
intelligent creatures, what do they need? They need to navigate their environment. They need to manipulate things. They need to communicate. So it doesn't surprise me terribly. Maybe the 10-year-old in me got disappointed that the alien that I got used to was a large-headed gray with big eyes. But it doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you, Craig?
It doesn't surprise me either, because there are has been many reports of small ones, medium-sized ones, really tall ones. They're all different shapes and sizes, just like humans. just like reptiles, hybrids. It's interesting. I mean, I've talked to so many people who have either met a hybrid or something, and they say that sometimes they can close their eyes, and then when they open them, you'll see reptile eyes, and then they can change it back at their own free will. That kind of thing. I personally have never seen it. I mean, I've seen the videos online, of course, but those are probably CGI'd or fooled over to sell YouTube views, for everybody there. But yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, all of the beings have 2 arms and 2 legs. Some are shorter legs. Some are longer legs. Some have longer arms. Some arms extend way down further than ours. Some arms go down to the knees. So
I'm fascinated with the reptilians, the snake creatures as well. But the reptilians, in the reading that I've done and listening to shows, etc., they often described as I've heard them described actually both ways, benevolent and malicious. Now that goes back to what you were saying earlier. Just because you're a member of a race doesn't fingerprint you to act like everybody in the race or everybody to act the same way in the race. Look at identity politics these days. It's a big question. So, I mean, why would it be any different? But I'm just curious, what have you noticed? Have you noticed that the reptilians tend to be benevolent or malicious or a combination?
Well, here's the one thing that I do know is when star seeds come in, and I'm not sure if your audience know what a star seed is, but that's where souls who are already fully conscious from other worlds, they do a service, and they leave their body behind in some kind of animation, and then they come here and they reincarnate. Their previous life is erased, and they are raised up with as they grow. They get an inkling of, they'll have either a big spiritual awakening or something will happen to them, and then all of a sudden, boom, they start studying, they start quickening their spirituality. And so they start growing, which helps people around them to start growing, and enlightenment sort of sparks and goes from there. So, so when a new starseed is happening, is what primarily happens with most starseeds is they will start to have visitations in dream states and the astral state with very menacing reptilians who are trying to scare them and knock them off of what they're doing. Because if you can get all of the star seeds to not grow, then you can still maintain control of a world that's in chaos. When enlightenment starts to spark and extend, you can no longer hold that control. So
so you're trying to keep it down. You're trying to keep it down.
Right. So that's the thinking behind that. And that does happen with children too, because I've interviewed a lot of children, and their parents are star seeds, and they know it. And the children are being chased in their dreams by reptilians. And in one case, there was a son and a father would have the identical dreams of the same reptile chasing them at the same night. So
now you say reptile. You say reptile, Craig. Are we talking about the evolution of dinosaurs?
Well, there are beings that they call dinosaurians that are apart from that. So here's what I don't know, and it has prompted me to think so much on this subject, especially learning. So when a species is advanced, like a lot of the human races, actually all of the races that are talked about in the book are very advanced, but the reptilians as well are extremely advanced. And when you become tech gods and you have the wherewithal to create life through different strands of DNA, you can start creating your own species, and you can start creating that species to do your bidding if you're an aggressive group. And then you can start to build your own little sort of army or whatever with those kind of beings. And in the case of extraterrestrial biological entities, which are basically chlorophyll based, those are created to come here and do the work of another race, primarily, from what I understand, are more aggressive race, because if you were a smart race, you would create these things to come and do the abductions and take genetic materials and do all of those things so that you're not caught red-handed.
Craig, does any
So,
of
yeah.
these races employ walk-ins to control an individual?
Yes. There's been lots of
Ah,
talk about that. So there
and
are walk-ins, like I know one woman who has had 3 walk-ins in her life, right? And so each one was a different personality. The one now is a very benevolent, higher consciousness being. This woman I could talk to for hours. She is like the cosmic radio to enlightenment and things that I never even dreamed of. So, hey there. There's a walk-in.
Speaking of walk-ins, yeah, what is a walk-in? Just to orient the
So
the
a
audience.
walk-in is like a soul exchange. So if at a certain point a soul decides they don't want to be here anymore, or if they had a soul contract and coming into a body and they were going to exchange it at a certain age, then that soul would leave the body, and then the new soul would come in and be that body. So
Okay.
there are positive and negative walk-ins, right?
yes,
As well. And the other thing about that is, if it is a negative one, they can do overlays, which
This sounds almost like demon possession.
well, it is. I was just going to say that
I'm
it gets
sorry.
into
Yeah.
sort of
yeah,
demonology and stuff, because the overlays can be from a really aggressive extraterrestrial race, and they just keep putting them over and over and over, and they can keep adding entities on, similar to what is demonic possession. So I know a lot of
yeah.
people in the paranormal world that work in that, Chip Coffey, one of them, and so I'm able to ask them about all of their investigations and what they experienced as well. So let's just say, if they can get into a very weak soul, or a soul who is doing lots of drugs and drinking, they can get in through the holes in their aura and start to
I'll make a note.
take them over. Yeah. Only 2 beers a night, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to walk in there.
Yeah.
That's
The reason
fascinating. This is the first time I've really heard about this. I've always heard about the discussion as to, some people would say, well, aliens are real. The other is like, no, they're demons. And of course, even when Chris and I did our UFO Halifax in 2003, we were plagued by religious people who were sure that we were pandering to the devil. So I find this very fascinating, this walk-in thing.
Yeah. Michael, even here in the Prestons, a black community, a couple of black communities that are satellite just outside the metro city here, Craig. I have found that the concept of walk-ins and the possibility that some walk-ins could be alien entities blends seamlessly into the Black Baptist followers' beliefs that sometimes they're the expression they use is being ridden by the devil. They say that person's not themselves; they're being ridden by a spirit, right? But when I would engage this person and talk, yes, sometimes the belief and the way the possessing spirit, the whatever you want to call it, their condition would address you, it would be, traditionally as a demon. But I have certainly encountered those that when you did this, and they would say no, that they were an individual from some other race or whatever. And it could be malevolent, it could be benevolent, right? But they were,
Right.
like you say, they had exchanged souls, and in this case with another species. But the whole thing was kind of blurred and kind of merged seamlessly into this belief that a person could be walked into by a malevolent spirit, by a demon, by the devil, whatever, depending on how rigid and how uh, their interpretation of their faith was. And it was interesting because in some cases what they would do is, how to help this person is they would shun them and ignore them till they became physically weak, because they were often just wandering around the community in the summer and not eating or drinking. And when they became in sufficient physical distress, they would be taken in and nursed back to health, and it would pass. But in some of the cases, it was taken as an alien encounter.
Yes, yeah, and it
Yeah,
could be whatever. A lot of this pertains to people's actual belief systems, right?
sure. Yeah.
So if somebody is negatively thinking about bad aliens and they're going to harm them, they're creating that scenario around them to attract that to them. It's just
Hmm.
like if you go out to ET Ranch and where you can look through night vision binoculars, and everyone does a little meditation, you can call in the craft, which is over Mount Adams, right? And these craft come in, and you're mentally connected to them, and you call in the enlightened beings in these craft, and then they have a laser pointer, and they point it at the craft, and then they talk to it and say, okay, power up, and then the craft will power up, move to the left, and the craft will move to the left. So just like you're attracting positive, you can do it in the opposite direction. And then what you don't want is those negative entities getting a foothold in that person's consciousness. I've seen a few people where it's gotten a hold of them, and they're now borderline sort of schizophrenic.
Wow.
Yeah.
So many correlations to demonology. It's amazing to see
Yes.
how
Yes.
confusion would reign.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Completely.
what about like a place like Skinwalker Ranch, or we would even say Southwest Nova? Craig, you may not. Well, you are because you're doing research. We have a plethora of supernatural / UFO type of activity in Southwest Nova Scotia. Not the same as Skinwalker Ranch, which of course is on territory that was, I believe, it was Navajo territory. Maybe not Navajo. Yeah, I think so.
I
And
think
of
it
course,
was the couple kind of Indians, the Ute and
Ute,
something else.
yeah,
Ute,
Ute, yeah,
Ute, and
yeah.
for Skinwalker, yeah. So
right. So my question
you
is,
guys have one up there too, huh?
well, it's sort of shaping up that way, and it's different. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not the same. But my question, we'll get into that. Chris will talk about that, but you guys can exchange some thoughts on that. But my question really was about, you know, the idea of the skinwalker, which basically is interpreted as a werewolf, really, and that it would be something that a shaman would conjure or become. Do you think there's a correlation between that and these these aliens? I mean, you have lights in the sky, you have a lot of similar things going on, but you also have these bizarre creatures. What do you think about that, Craig?
Skinwalker Ranch, for instance, the Shermans who owned it before Bigelow, they were the ones that I think they only had it for a couple of years.
Hmm.
And they would see the lights and the ships and mysterious things happening on the land. And then out of nowhere, there was a wolf that was not a werewolf, but it was a giant wolf, right?
Hmm.
Like a big wolf. And Mr. Sherman shot at it many, many times. And I
Hmm.
think from what I heard, I think it climbed up into a tree, and it was in a tree, and then it vanished into the portal. So we
Hmm.
know that land, from all of the experimentation, that they've done on it now on the TV show for 2 seasons, right? Now Brandon Fugel owns it, and that there are times where the energy escalates, and that up in the sky there's like something that has got so much energy that is coming down. And my hypothesis of that is, from way back, I have always felt that there's probably some kind of negative extraterrestrial base underneath that property, or there's a giant buried ship. Now, they do have the technology to take a craft and put it into underground where it can just be there for as long as they want it to, because they can bend with like an energy. They can bend it to the width that they want, and then they can just blink the ship from here into the space that they've created for it. So
wow.
That's what I have always felt. I don't think they're going to ever get to that hypothesis on that TV show, because I don't think the government's going to allow them to say that. But there is another ranch in outside of Sedona called the Bradshaw Ranch. Have you ever heard of that one?
Can't say I have. No. Chris?
No, you haven't. So
No,
the Bradshaw Ranch had reptilians, grays, albino Sasquatch, and dimensions opening up where they took photographs and they would see a whole different scene in another dimension or a different timeline that was not part of their timeline, right? And this place has such an otherworldly energy to it. It is now abandoned. It used to be an old movie studio. Elvis Presley shot movies there. Joan Crawford. I mean, lots of people shot movies and all kinds of TV shows. And then the ranch, at night, there was one story where so there's an old homestead where the original people who homesteaded the land lived in a little 2-bedroom house. So that's abandoned. When Bob Bradshaw bought it, he built a giant house, and then later on he built a whole front giant room, which was a saloon, because he would therefore people would come there and they would have cookouts, and he would do Wild West shows and all kinds of things. So so one night in the homestead, Linda Bradshaw's son and his girlfriend and the girlfriend's daughter were in the homestead house, and they were woken up in the wee hours of the morning, and when they looked out, they saw little gray creatures wandering around the property. Now, mind you, the homestead house and the ranch were very close by. It was a quick, minute run from one house to the next. And they were literally terrified because these creatures were walking by the windows and that kind of thing. And then at a certain point, they kept watch, and when they didn't see anymore, they ran into the big house. They woke up Linda, and Linda, they were telling her, and as they were telling her in the living room, they saw gray creatures walking by the front window. And so Linda ran outside because she was used to these things and she wanted to confront them. And every time she would run out, it would be gone. Right. Bob Bradshaw never wanted any part of Linda's investigations, along with Tom Dongo, who wrote a great book on it called Merging Dimensions. Him and Linda wrote a really good book. And Bob, I think in like 1981, actually saw a ship in broad daylight land just outside of the ranch house, and a creature got out. And from that moment on, he wanted nothing to do with it. So in between the homestead house and the ranch, there was a tree, and that was a portal. So many people have gone there over the years. I know Greer went there once, and they did a whole sky watching thing, and so and they were having a lot of animal mutilations with mares and cattle and things like that. So Linda believed that she would gift the albino Sasquatch, which was a female, because she later became pregnant, and then there were little baby Sasquatch feet next to hers. But she believed that these Sasquatch actually, her mare was pregnant, that she actually protected her from the Greys or the reptilians that were doing these mutilations, because she would find the white hairs of the Bigfoot on the actual mare's belly.
Wow.
So
Craig.
it's a great story. Yeah, it's a fascinating one. Yeah.
Yeah, Craig, I got to ask, out of the 82 alien species that made the cut, are there any non-human mammalian species in the book?
No.
I'm just wondering, because you mentioned albino Sasquatch. I thought, the
Yeah.
no.
Yeah,
Seems a little
no,
odd.
I didn't put
Yeah.
I didn't put Bigfoot or Sasquatch in, only because we're not really sure where they come from, but most of the research and everything seems to be that they're interdimensional. On the Bradshaw Ranch, they actually once, through filming with a old VHS recorder, that's how they would see into the other dimensions. And they actually saw the albino Sasquatch walking, and there was a saucer craft up above. So we don't really know. And I think there's been so many things said about them, that I wanted to sort of include a lot of the other species in there as well.
You say that at 26 you had a spiritual awakening that was completely transformative. What was the impetus or inspiration for that?
Well, I started having, in the dream state, being in front of universal master teachers. There were three of them. And when I would just dream and be in front of them, and I would just feel this unbelievable emanating love. And I remember the first night I sort of woke up and I went, oh, that was interesting, and just thought it was a dream, and I went back to sleep. But every night for 2 months, it reoccurred. And I just kept feeling more and more love every time I saw these beings. Then the next step for the next 2 months were, I would be in the dream, and then I would wake up in the dream and realize my soul was actually there in their presence, in their sector of wherever they were, right? Somewhere else. So my
So like
soul
a
was
like
now
split.
having, yes, yeah. And so it was a different experience, but it was still an unbelievable emanation of love. And then the last 2 months were, I would be in the dream, wake up in the dream, and then when I would wake up in my bed, I would open my eyes, and then their astral bodies would be at the foot of my bed, and I would just look at them and go, wow, this is really happening. This is interesting. What does all of this mean? Right. And so anyway, at the end of 6 months, uh, I was in their realm, and they, from their hands, fed this golden light into my body, and I just like ballooned up, and it felt like all of my cells came alive. And when I woke up in bed, I was in this incredible nirvanic state. And what that was for the next 8 months, I was waking up to uh, the creation behind creation. So I was now looking at everything differently. I was seeing the love behind everything created, from food to plant life to people. And at a certain point, I could look at a person and I could start to read their soul history. And I would become so overwhelmed with the beauty of it, I would sob. And so
Wow.
every day I sobbed 8 to 12 times a day. And I'm talking really hard sobs, beautiful sobs. And it went on for 8 months, and I really didn't understand. I thought it was never going to end. And so I was writing down all my experiences, and then I would have more and more. And then at a certain point, my light body was activated, and I started astral traveling to other worlds. I started learning about other worlds, and various many more experiences that through all of that timeline. But in the final thing, we basically oh, I guess that's our end. I guess the listeners aren't going to be able to hear it.
That's
Well,
because you, being in Hollywood, should know that you always have to leave something to come back for, right,
that's our
Craig?
ending.
yeah.
But it's in
Yeah.
the autobiography of an extraterrestrial books. So
Well, fascinating conversation. There's never enough time. I mean, I got to say, there's never enough time. If I ever get down there, I'm going to look you up. But we're going to get you back on the show
yes,
again. And you got your new
I'd
book
love
coming
to.
out.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's the book, The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, the ultimate guide to Greys, reptilians, hybrids, and Nordics. And Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and what was the other source, Greg? You can get that book, Barnes and Noble, Amazon.
And everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere books are
That was
sold.
it.
Chris, any last
Books are
words?
sold. Yeah, and
Can't go wrong.
bound or something like that. Yeah.
Craig, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And good luck with your book, your new book. And thanks very much for spending time with us.
You're welcome. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Thanks. And
Thank
everybody,
you.
thanks for watching the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll put all the information on Craig in the description of the video of the YouTube. And we really look forward to seeing you for another episode of FSUFO. Goodbye, everybody. We're gone.